So now to my guest today, the former governor of New York, former attorney general of New York, Eliot Spitzer. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
When you saw the news about these AIG bonuses, what did you think? This was the company that you prosecuted way back when.
On the one hand, I was not surprised. Bonuses are part and parcel of Wall Street compensation. And I think if you looked at any company, you would see bonuses of an equivalent size. So I think to a certain extent, what we are now doing is looking at what is a typical part of Wall Street compensation, voicing a visceral outrage that is legitimate, but is not particular to AIG.
But when you took on AIG, what troubled you about it? What made you look at AIG and say something's wrong here?
Their fundamental accounting structure was wrong. And when we prosecuted them, we brought a case alleging that they had manufactured false, fictitious reinsurance contracts. It's a very technical issue, but they were false reinsurance contracts designed to create the appearance of capital on the books, which was not there. And this was a structure that had been designed and orchestrated at the very top of the company. And as we dug into the accounting...
So they were basically fudging the numbers to make it seem as though they had a stronger balance sheet than they had.
Precisely. That's exactly right. And the underlying effort was to create an illusion of financial strength that was not there. And as we dug more deeply into the underlying structure and organization and accounting that was ongoing at the company, we knew there was a problem. And just parenthetically, 4 people have been convicted of this. The former CEO was called an unindicted co-conspirator in the federal courtroom by the federal prosecutor. So this was a fundamental effort to alter the actuality and to lie to the public.
So do you think that the problems that AIG got into later on stem from some of the same practices that you were trying to get at?
They stemmed from an effort from the very top to gin up returns whenever, wherever possible, and to push the boundaries in a way that would garner returns almost regardless of risk. And so, to the extent that there is a discussion, did this begin before or after the tenure of Hank Greenberg, it's unambiguous that the structures and the flaws and the policies began while he was there. That is why the board that he had controlled with an iron fist asked him to leave. It was their decision, not my decision, their decision to ask him to step down, something that was then and is now very unusual. He has invoked the Fifth Amendment, which of course is his right to do, but he was asked to leave by his own board because they saw the flaws and the problems that have since multiplied and created this monster that can bring down the financial system. Back then, I said to people, AIG is at the center of the web. The financial tentacles of this company stretched to every major investment bank. The web between AIG and Goldman Sachs is something that should be pursued. And as I have written...
Meaning what? Meaning that a lot of the money that we, the taxpayers, gave AIG has ended up being paid to Goldman Sachs.
Precisely.
And other companies.
The so-called counterparties to these very sophisticated financial transactions. When AIG initially received $80 billion, a decision that was a consequence of a very brief meeting of the president of the New York Fed, the Secretary of the Treasury, perhaps Chairman Bernanke, and arguably some reports say the chairman of Goldman Sachs, $80 billion, virtually all of it flowed out to counterparties, $12.9 billion to Goldman Sachs. Why did that happen? What questions were asked? Why did we need to pay 100 cents on the dollar on those transactions if we had to pay anything? What would have happened to the financial system had it not been paid? These are the questions that should be pursued. Look, bonus is a real issue. It touches us viscerally. The real money and the real structural issue is the dynamic between AIG and the counterparties.
Because those payments are in the tens of billions of dollars. The bonuses are a few hundred million.
The bonuses, we think, are $164 million, give or take. Huge money. I mean, nobody should diminish that. These counterparty payments, tens and tens of billions of dollars.
And to your mind, it seems as though this taxpayer money may have been recklessly and unwisely paid off?
It may be that a case could be made that it should have been paid, but at a moment in our nation's history when everybody is being asked to bear a piece of the burden, everybody, people are being told work 4 days a week, not 5. Sales taxes are going to go up. Contracts are being broken and renegotiated for workers across America. Our 401ks and our savings have been depleted by the recklessness of Wall Street. For Goldman and the other counterparties not to be able to say, we can make do with only 50 cents on the dollar, 30 cents on the dollar, after we've already given Goldman a $25 billion cash infusion, they are sitting on vast amounts of cash on the sidelines, which is their right, but they're going to invest it in due course based upon their judgment. For them, on top of all that, to get another $12.9 billion in the dark, without questions, after a meeting of this sort is fundamentally wrong, and that is the nature of the inquiry that should be raised.
Is there, as far as you know, a congressional inquiry into these monies?
I do not know if there is or isn't. I certainly hope that Barney Frank, who is the chairman of the Right Committee, will do so. He's a brilliant guy, spectacular legislator and lawyer. I have absolute confidence that if he pokes at this, he will get to the bottom of it. He is somebody, there are many on Capitol Hill who are beating their chests so loudly you know it's just to cover up their neglect and failure over the last decade. They sat there and watched and did nothing, as they clearly should have known that we were building a system that was a house of cards. And they enjoyed it and prospered from it, and there was a symbiotic relationship between them and Wall Street. Barney Frank is not one of those. Barney Frank will ask the right questions, and I hope he does.
Was the regulatory regime in place strong enough? And I'm thinking particularly of the New York Fed, which was headed by Tim Geithner, of the SEC. Where do you see the flaw having been over the last few years?
Here's my answer to that. The regulatory system was structurally flawed, but that's not why this happened. After the last round of scandals, Enron et al., we passed Sarbanes-Oxley, and we said, aha, we've solved the problem. Now we have another set of scandals. There are enough laws, enough regulations on the books for smart, aggressive regulators and prosecutors to make all the cases. What was missing was judgment. And you can't legislate judgment. You can't regulate judgment. Either the people who are the regulators will walk into a bank and say, your leverage is too great, we're going to take actions to pull it back, or this type of investment is flawed, or they won't. You can't pass a law that says you must use sound judgment. Bubbles have been there through history, through overregulation and underregulation. This is a question of judgment and a failure of judgment. When I was Attorney General, people said, oh, you're using this crazy little statute, the Martin Act in New York, to bring all these cases. The Martin Act had a simple anti-fraud provision. That's all we used. The federal government has exponentially more regulatory power than we did. What was lacking was the judgment, the tenacity, the desire to rein in a financial system that was spiraling out of control.
How do you think President Obama is handling this crisis?
Well, I think he is doing stupendously. I mean, I'm a huge fan of his. I think we all have to be and should be, if only because he has been thrust into a dynamic that is almost impossible. He's trying to put out not 500 small fires, 500 forest fires simultaneously, and he is addressing them sequentially, trying to keep a political coalition together. But it's very hard, and I think one of the largest, most difficult tasks that he has is to control the outrage that is brewing in the public, sympathize with it and garner it, but use it to get good policy, not policy based upon anger. Populism, if we go to the other extreme, we had libertarianism masquerading as capitalism for the past 30 years. That didn't work, and we knew it wouldn't work. I'm worried that we will go to the other extreme and end up with rank populism. That could be just as dangerous. And it's very hard to craft the reasoned policies that make the market work without losing the support of the public. That's what he's trying to do. It's a very difficult task. He is a brilliant communicator and a brilliant leader. And I think we all have to hope that he succeeds.
Do you worry about this kind of populist anger when you watch the outrage over the bonuses?
Yes. The outrage is legitimate, but it is being fomented by sort of a faux populism by many on Capitol Hill who saw this coming, who knew this was going on. And so I look at them and I say, come on, guys, you're supposed to be more mature. Express the anger, but then say, how do we solve it? Don't just throw more oil on the fire. And I am worried by that, and I'm worried that it will be destructive to our capitalist system. And I've said since the very beginning that my energy was directed at preserving and protecting capitalism. The libertarians didn't understand it. Populists don't understand it. But capitalism is what we want to preserve.
A simple legal question. If you were in a position where you could do something about it, what would you do about the bonuses? Legally, what strategy would you employ?
I think I might go back to a very old tort theory of unjust enrichment, contract theory, tort theory, and say, you know what, guys, there's a theory in the law that says, a couple theories. One, impossibility, saying AIG just doesn't have the money to pay you. And absent the federal infusion, it wouldn't have it, so we can't pay. And second, I would say unjust enrichment. You simply don't deserve it. It's an equitable argument. Some courts might go for it, some courts might not. But as a practical matter, as the President of the United States, I think I would call the CEOs into the Oval Office and I would say, guys, this isn't tenable. We're all going to have to suck it up a little bit and show the American people that we know what it means to be part of a community and share the sacrifice. Let's see if we can't solve this without the legal wrangling. And I bet he could. I have no doubt that President Obama could do that.